Officer Mark Thompson lived a life many would envy. He was a dedicated police officer who served his community with pride, and he came home every evening to the love of his life, his wife, Sarah. Their small suburban house stood on a tree-lined street where neighbors exchanged warm smiles and children played freely in the yards. It was the kind of place where nothing bad ever seemed to happen. For years, Mark had taken comfort in this peaceful existence. But tonight, something felt off. As Mark drove into the driveway after a long shift, he noticed an eerie stillness hanging over the neighborhood. Usually there were lights glowing from inside homes, laughter drifting through open windows, or at least the hum of a television. Tonight, however, everything was quiet, too quiet. Even the crickets that typically filled the night air with their chirping were silent. Mark frowned as he parked his car and stepped out, his boots crunching against the gravel. He glanced toward the house. Something wasn't right. The porch light was off, which was strange because Sarah always left it on for him when he worked, late. The curtains were drawn shut and no warm glow emanated from within. Mark's stomach tightened. His instincts, honed by years on the force, screamed at him that something was wrong. "Sarah," he called out as he approached the front door. No answer. He fumbled for his keys, his fingers trembling slightly despite his best efforts to stay calm. Unlocking the door, he pushed it open slowly, calling her name again. "Sarah, are you here?" The silence inside the house swallowed his words. Mark flipped the light switch, but nothing happened. The power must have gone out. He pulled out his phone to use its flashlight app, illuminating the dim interior. What he saw made his heart skip a beat. The living room looked like it had been ransacked. A chair lay overturned, papers scattered across the floor, and one of the cushions from the couch was missing. None of this made sense. Who would do this? And where was Sarah? Mark's mind raced with possibilities. Had someone broken in? Was she hurt? Or worse? His training kicked in, forcing him to push aside his rising panic and focus on finding answers. Moving cautiously through the house, he checked each room, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The kitchen was untouched, the dining table still set with 2 plates, one for him, one for her. That detail struck him as odd. If someone had broken in, why hadn't they touched anything valuable? Then, as he entered the living room again, he spotted her. Sarah was lying on the floor near the couch, her body motionless. Mark froze, his breath catching in his throat. For a moment, all he could do was stare, his mind refusing to process what he was seeing. Finally, he snapped out of it and rushed to her side, dropping to his knees. "Sarah," he shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. He shook her gently, searching for any sign of life. Her face was pale, her eyes half closed, and her breathing shallow. Relief washed over him when he realized she was alive, but barely. Then, her lips moved, and she whispered 3 words that sent a chill down his spine. "They're watching us." Before Mark could ask what she meant, her head lolled back, and she slipped into unconsciousness. Panic surged through him like a tidal wave. Who was watching them? Why, and how much danger were they really in? Mark's thoughts spiraled as he frantically dialed 911, his hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped the phone. While waiting for the ambulance, he scanned the room again, looking for anything that might explain what had happened. That's when he noticed something tucked under the edge of the coffee table, a small black device blinking faintly. It looked like some kind of surveillance camera. Mark picked it up carefully, his stomach churning. Someone had planted this in their home. Someone had been spying on them. By the time paramedics arrived, Mark's mind was reeling. They loaded Sarah onto a stretcher, assuring him she was stable but needed medical attention. As they wheeled her away, Mark held onto the tiny device, tightly, vowing to get to the bottom of whatever nightmare they had stumbled into. Little did he know, his journey was only beginning, and the truth would be far more dangerous than he could have imagined. For now, though, Mark sat alone in the ambulance, holding Sarah's hand and replaying those 3 haunting words in his mind. "They're watching us." The hospital waiting room felt suffocating, its sterile white walls doing little to ease Mark's racing thoughts. He sat hunched forward on a hard plastic chair, his elbows resting on his knees as he stared blankly at the tiled floor. Sarah's words echoed in his mind like a broken record. They're watching us. Who were they? What did Sarah know that had put them in danger? And why couldn't she remember anything when she woke up? Doctors assured him that Sarah was stable, but needed rest. She had suffered from dehydration and exhaustion, possibly exacerbated by stress or trauma. But none of their explanations addressed the bigger questions gnawing at Mark. Why would someone plant a surveillance device in their home? Who could have done this? And most importantly, what did they want? Mark pulled the small black device out of his pocket again, turning it over in his hands. It was sleek and compact, no larger than a matchbox. The blinking red light seemed mocking now, a reminder that their privacy had been violated without their knowledge. Mark wasn't an expert in technology, but even he could tell this wasn't something you'd find at your average electronics store. Whoever had installed it knew what they were doing, and they weren't amateurs. As the hours dragged on, Mark's frustration grew. He hated feeling powerless, especially when it came to protecting his family. His job as a police officer had always given him a sense of control, a way to make things right. But this situation was different. This wasn't about catching a petty thief or breaking up a bar fight. This was personal. Someone had targeted his wife, and maybe him too. When the nurse finally told him Sarah was awake and able to see visitors, Mark bolted out of his seat and hurried to her room. Pushing open the door, he found her lying in bed, looking pale but alert. Her eyes lit up when she saw him, and for a brief moment Mark allowed himself to feel relief. At least she was safe. For now. "How are you feeling?" he asked softly, pulling up a chair beside her bed. "I'm okay," Sarah replied, though her voice was weak. "But I don't remember much. Just waking up on the floor and seeing you." Mark hesitated, unsure how to broach the subject. "Do you remember saying anything before you passed out?" Sarah frowned, trying to recall. Then her expression changed. Her eyes widened with fear. "I said something, didn't I? Something about being watched?" Mark nodded grimly. "You told me they're watching us. Do you know what that means? Did something happen recently that might explain it?" Sarah shook her head slowly, tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't know, Mark. I swear I don't. But I've been feeling uneasy lately, like someone was following me, or watching me. I thought it was just my imagination. But now..." Her voice trailed off, leaving an uncomfortable silence between them. Mark reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "It's going to be okay," he said firmly, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. "We'll figure this out together." Later that night, after Sarah fell asleep, Mark returned home to search for answers. Every step through the house felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of the unknown pressed down on him. He started in the living room, where everything still looked chaotic. The overturned furniture, the scattered papers, the eerie emptiness. He began sifting through the mess, hoping to find some clue, no matter how small. In the corner of the room, near the coffee table, he noticed something he hadn't seen earlier, a crumpled piece of paper wedged beneath the couch. Pulling it free, he smoothed it out and examined it under the light. It was a handwritten note, written in shaky handwriting. "Stay quiet, or else." Mark's stomach churned. The message was vague, but unmistakably threatening. Was this meant for Sarah? For both of them? He tucked the note into his pocket and continued searching, determined not to miss anything. His next stop was Sarah's office, a small room she used for work-related tasks. Normally tidy, it now looked like it had been ransacked. Drawers were pulled out, papers strewn across the desk, and her laptop lay open on the floor. Mark crouched down to inspect it, noticing that the screen was cracked. Had someone tried to destroy it? Or had it simply fallen during whatever chaos had unfolded here? He powered it on, praying it would still work. After a few tense moments, the screen flickered to life. To his surprise, the password prompt appeared immediately. Mark typed in the code Sarah always used, their wedding anniversary date, and waited anxiously. When the desktop loaded, he let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Scanning the files, he quickly realized that something was very wrong. Several folders had been deleted, their contents erased beyond recovery. But one file remained intact, labeled innocuously as charity reports. Curious, Mark opened it and began scrolling through the documents inside. At first glance, they appeared to be mundane summaries of Sarah's volunteer work at a local nonprofit organization. But as he read further, certain details caught his attention. Names of individuals involved in high-profile projects, references to large sums of money, and cryptic notes about unauthorized transactions. Mark's pulse quickened. These weren't ordinary charity reports. They hinted at something far more sinister, something Sarah might have uncovered without realizing it. Could she have stumbled upon evidence of corruption? Fraud? Something worse? Suddenly, a loud noise outside startled him. Mark froze, his hand instinctively reaching for the gun holstered at his side. Peering through the window, he saw nothing but shadows moving in the darkness. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was out there, watching. Forcing himself to focus, Mark copied the suspicious files onto a USB drive and shut down the laptop. He needed to take these documents to someone who could help him make sense of them, but who could he trust? His instincts told him this went deeper than he initially thought, and involving the wrong person could put both him and Sarah in even greater danger. As dawn approached, Mark sat alone in the dim light of the kitchen, staring at the USB drive in his hand. Whatever secrets it held, they were tied directly to the nightmare unfolding around them. One thing was certain: the peaceful life he and Sarah had built was gone, replaced by a web of lies and threats they couldn't yet fully understand. And somewhere out there, whoever was responsible was still watching. The next morning, Mark woke up with a heavy heart and a mind racing faster than ever before. He hadn't slept much. How could he, when every shadow seemed to whisper danger, and every sound outside felt like footsteps creeping closer? The USB drive sat on the kitchen counter, its tiny form holding secrets that weighed more than anything physical ever could. Mark knew he needed answers, but diving into those files alone wasn't enough. He had to find out what Sarah had been working on recently, and why someone would go to such lengths to silence her. After making sure Sarah was comfortable at the hospital, Mark decided to visit her workplace. She worked part-time for a local charity organization called Hope Haven, which focused on helping underprivileged families in the community. On any other day, Hope Haven's cheerful headquarters, a small office tucked between a bakery and a flower shop, would have felt warm and inviting. Today it just felt tense. Something about the atmosphere made Mark uneasy, as though everyone already knew something bad had happened. He introduced himself to the receptionist, explaining that he was there to gather information about Sarah's recent projects. The woman nodded sympathetically but hesitated before leading him to Sarah's supervisor, Linda, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Mark, I'm so sorry about what happened to Sarah," Linda said, offering him a seat. "Is she okay?" "She's stable," Mark replied curtly, cutting straight to the point. "But I need your help. Do you know if Sarah was involved in anything unusual lately? Anything that might have upset someone?" Linda frowned, clearly taken aback by the question. "Unusual? Not that I'm aware of. She mostly handled administrative tasks, organizing events, managing donations, things like that." "Why do you ask?" Mark hesitated. He didn't want to reveal too much, especially not without knowing whom he could trust. Instead, he pulled out the crumpled note he'd found under the couch, the one that read, "Stay quiet or else." Handing it to Linda, he asked, "Does this look familiar? Has Sarah mentioned receiving threats like this?" Linda paled as she read the message. "No, never. This is terrifying, but—" She trailed off, biting her lip. "But what?" Mark pressed. "Well, Linda glanced around nervously, lowering her voice. A few weeks ago, Sarah came to me looking worried. She said she'd received some anonymous letters at home, warning her to stay out of certain things. At the time, I thought it was just paranoia. You know how stressful these jobs can be sometimes. But now... Mark leaned forward, his heart pounding. What did the letters say exactly? Did she show them to anyone? Linda shook her head. No, she kept them to herself, said they were private. Honestly, I thought she was overreacting, but maybe I should have listened. Frustrated but determined, Mark thanked Linda and left the office. Back at home, he began searching every corner of the house again, hoping to find the mysterious letters. It took hours, but eventually he struck gold. Hidden deep in the back of Sarah's closet, behind stacks of old sweaters, was a shoebox filled with crumpled envelopes. Each one bore no return address, and the handwriting on them was jagged and hurried as though written in a rush. Mark opened the first letter carefully, his hands trembling slightly. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a short, ominous message. You don't belong here. Stop asking questions. The second letter was worse. We warned you once, don't make us regret letting you live. And then the third. You know too much. Stay quiet or face the consequences. Each letter sent a fresh wave of fear coursing through Mark's veins. Whoever had sent these wasn't playing games. They meant business. And judging by the escalating tone, Sarah must have ignored their warnings, digging deeper into whatever dangerous truth she had uncovered. Mark spent the rest of the afternoon poring over the letters, trying to piece together their meaning. They offered no concrete clues, no names, no locations, but the phrase, "You know too much," kept repeating itself in his mind. What did Sarah know? Was it related to the files on the USB drive? Determined to connect the dots, Mark booted up Sarah's laptop again and inserted the drive. This time, he delved deeper into the documents, paying close attention to the details. One file stood out. A spreadsheet listing large sums of money transferred between various accounts. Some of the names attached to the transactions were familiar. Local politicians, wealthy businessmen, even a few high-ranking police officers. Another document contained photos of people exchanging briefcases in dimly lit parking lots, along with timestamps and GPS coordinates. As Mark scrolled through the evidence, a chilling realization dawned on him. These weren't just random reports. They were proof of corruption, embezzlement, and possibly even organized crime. Someone within the system had been using charities like Hope Haven as fronts for illegal activities. And Sarah, whether intentionally or accidentally, had stumbled upon the truth. Suddenly, Mark heard a faint click from somewhere in the house. His blood ran cold. He froze, straining his ears to listen. The sound came again, a soft creak near the front door. Heart pounding, Mark grabbed his gun and crept toward the noise, moving silently through the hallway. Peering through the peephole, he saw nothing outside except an empty driveway. Still, the feeling of being watched lingered. Returning to the kitchen, Mark locked all the doors and windows, double-checking each one twice. Then he turned off the lights and sat in the dark, staring at the blinking red light of the surveillance device still sitting on the counter. Who had planted it? How long had it been there? And most importantly, whoever it was, were they watching right now? For the first time in years, Mark felt truly vulnerable. As a cop, he had always believed he could handle anything life threw at him. But this wasn't just another case, it was personal. Every step he took brought him closer to the truth, but also deeper into danger. Somewhere out there, powerful forces were at play, and they wouldn't stop until Sarah's discovery was buried forever. Yet despite the fear gnawing at him, Mark refused to back down. Sarah was counting on him. Their future depended on uncovering the truth and exposing the people responsible. No matter the cost, he vowed to protect his wife and bring justice to those who had tried to destroy their lives. The weight of the evidence on the USB drive pressed heavily on Mark's shoulders as he sat alone in the dimly lit kitchen. The clock ticked loudly in the background, each second stretching into an eternity. He couldn't shake the feeling that Time was running out, not just for him and Sarah, but for anyone else who might be caught in the crossfire of this conspiracy. Whoever was behind these crimes wasn't going to stop until they silenced everyone involved. Mark knew he needed help, but trusting anyone right now felt like walking blindfolded through a minefield. His instincts screamed at him to keep digging deeper, but he also realized he couldn't do it alone. After hours of staring at the files on Sarah's laptop, he decided to reach out to someone he trusted implicitly, his old partner from the YOR Police Academy, Detective Ryan Cole. Though they hadn't worked together in years, Ryan had always been the kind of guy you could count on when things got rough. Mark called Ryan late that night, choosing his words carefully. "Hey man, I need your help with something personal," he said, keeping his tone casual. "Can we meet up tomorrow? Somewhere private?" Ryan didn't hesitate. "Sure thing, Mark. What's going on?" "I'll explain everything when I see you," Mark replied. "Just bring your badge and your wits. This isn't a normal case." The next morning, Mark met Ryan at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, a place they used to use for stakeouts during their rookie days. It was secluded, far from prying eyes, and perfect for discussing sensitive matters. As Ryan stepped out of his car, his sharp gaze scanned the area before landing on Mark. "You look like hell," Ryan said bluntly, taking in Mark's disheveled appearance. Dark circles hung under his eyes, and his usual calm demeanor was replaced by a jittery tension. "Thanks," Mark muttered dryly. "Now imagine how I feel." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "All right, spill it. What's got you so spooked?" Mark handed over the USB drive without a word. "Take a look at this, and tell me what you think." For the next hour, Ryan sifted through the files, his expression growing darker with every document he opened. When he finally looked up, his face was pale. "This is huge, Mark. We're talking about some serious corruption here. Money laundering, bribery, maybe even ties to organized crime. Where did you get this?" "It belongs to Sarah," Mark admitted. "She works, or rather, worked, for Hope Haven. Somehow, she uncovered all of this, and now—" He trailed off, his voice cracking slightly. "Now someone's trying to shut her up." Ryan let out a low whistle. "Damn. No wonder you're scared. If even half of this is true, then whoever's behind it has connections everywhere, including the department." Mark nodded grimly. "That's why I didn't go through official channels. I don't know who I can trust anymore." Ryan leaned back against the wall, rubbing his temples. "You realize what you're asking me to do, right? If we dig too deep, we risk exposing ourselves and putting targets on our backs." "I know," Mark said firmly, "but we can't let them win. Not when lives are at stake." Ryan hesitated for a moment, then gave a slow nod. "All right, let's do this, but we need a plan and we need to move fast." With Ryan on board, Mark felt a flicker of hope for the first time in days. Together, they began piecing together the puzzle, starting with the names listed in the documents. Some were familiar faces, politicians, business tycoons, and senior law enforcement officials whose reputations seemed untouchable. Others were less recognizable, but their roles in the scheme became clearer as Mark and Ryan cross-referenced bank records, property deeds, and surveillance footage. One name kept popping up repeatedly: Victor Langston, a wealthy real estate developer, known for his philanthropy and political donations. On paper, Langston appeared squeaky clean, but the files suggested otherwise. He was linked to several shell companies used to funnel money into illegal activities, and photos showed him meeting with shady characters in shadowy locations. "This guy's the key," Ryan said, pointing to Langston's profile on the screen. "If we can tie him to any of this, we've got leverage." Mark agreed. "But how do we prove it? Most of this evidence is circumstantial. We need something concrete, something undeniable." Their breakthrough came unexpectedly later that evening. While reviewing security camera footage from one of the locations mentioned in the files, Ryan spotted something unusual. In the corner of the frame, a figure emerged from a black sedan wearing a hat pulled low over their face. But despite the disguise, Mark recognized the person immediately. It was Detective Harris, a senior officer from his precinct. "What the hell is he doing there?" Ryan exclaimed, stunned. Mark clenched his fists, anger bubbling inside him. "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." Determined to confront Harris, Mark returned home to gather more evidence. As he rummaged through Sarah's belongings once again, he found another crucial piece of the puzzle: a journal tucked away in the bottom drawer of her desk. Flipping through its pages, Mark discovered detailed notes Sarah had written about her suspicions. She had been tracking suspicious transactions for months, documenting patterns and connecting dots that no one else seemed to notice. One entry stood out. Victor Langston is using Hope Haven as a front. Money flows in, then disappears. Someone tipped me off anonymously, but I think they're testing me. If I'm wrong, I'm dead. Mark's stomach churned. Sarah had known exactly what she was dealing with, and she had paid the price for it. Her bravery both terrified and inspired him. He vowed to honor her courage by seeing this through to the end. Later that night, Mark set up a hidden camera outside their house, determined to catch whoever had been watching them. Around midnight, movement on the live feed caught his attention. A dark figure crept around the backyard fence, lingering near the bushes. Adrenaline surged through Mark as he grabbed his gun and quietly slipped outside. "Freeze!" he shouted, stepping into view. The figure froze, then slowly turned around. To Mark's shock, it was none other than Detective Harris. Harris sneered when he saw Mark. "You should have stayed out of this, kid," he spat. "Your wife got greedy, poking her nose where it didn't belong. Now you're playing hero? You don't understand what you're dealing with." Mark trained his gun on Harris, his voice steady despite the fury building inside him. "Explain yourself, Harris, or better yet, start talking." Harris smirked, clearly unafraid. "Let's just say Langston doesn't take kindly to loose ends, and neither do I." Before Harris could say more, Ryan arrived, having followed Mark. After noticing his abrupt departure, with backup on hand, Mark arrested Harris on the spot, confiscating his phone and forcing him to reveal the extent of his involvement. Under pressure, Harris cracked, admitting that he had been Langston's inside man within the police department, feeding information and ensuring investigations went nowhere. But even as they hauled Harris away, Mark knew this was only the beginning. Langston was still out there, pulling strings and orchestrating chaos. Taking down Harris was a victory, but it wouldn't stop the larger machine from grinding forward. As dawn broke, Mark stood outside his house, staring at the horizon. The road ahead would be dangerous, filled with twists and turns he couldn't predict. But for the first time in days, he felt ready to face it. With Sarah fighting for her life in the hospital and justice hanging in the balance, he had no choice but to keep moving forward. The arrest of Detective Harris marked a turning point in Mark's investigation, but it also opened the floodgates to a storm of danger he hadn't fully anticipated. With Harris in custody, Mark and Ryan gained access to confidential records that confirmed their worst fears. Victor Langston wasn't just a corrupt businessman, he was the mastermind behind an intricate web of illegal activities spanning decades. Bribery, embezzlement, blackmail, and even murder were all part of his empire, and now, with Harris exposed, Langston would stop at nothing to protect himself. Mark knew they were playing with fire. Every step closer to uncovering the truth put them deeper into harm's way. But there was no going back, not when Sarah's life hung in the balance. She had risked everything to expose Langston's crimes, and Mark owed it to her to see it through. Still, as the days passed, the pressure mounted. Sleep became a luxury Mark couldn't afford, and paranoia gnawed at him constantly. Every shadow outside the house felt like a lurking threat, every phone call a potential trap. Ryan tried to reassure him. "We've got enough evidence to bring this guy down," he said one evening as they pored over documents at Mark's kitchen table. "Harris spilled everything. Names, dates, transactions. It's only a matter of time before we can tie it all directly to Langston." "But what if time is exactly what he's buying?" Mark snapped, slamming his fist on the table. "Every second we wait gives him a chance to cover his tracks, or worse, come after us." Ryan sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I get it, man. You're scared for Sarah. So am I. But rushing into this blind will get us killed. We need to play smart." Mark glared at him but didn't argue further. Deep down, he knew Ryan was right. They needed more than circumstantial evidence. They needed proof so undeniable that not even Langston's money or connections could save him. And that meant taking risks neither of them had anticipated. The next day, Mark decided to revisit Hope Haven, hoping to find additional clues about how Langston operated. When he arrived, the office seemed eerily quiet. Linda greeted him nervously, her usual warmth replaced by visible unease. "Mark, you shouldn't be here," she whispered urgently, pulling him aside. "People are watching. Someone asked about you yesterday, said they were looking for information about Sarah." A chill ran down Mark's spine. "Who?" Linda shook her head. "I don't know. But whoever it was, they didn't look like cops. Please, be careful." Mark thanked her and quickly left, his mind racing. If Langston's people were already sniffing around Hope Haven, it meant they suspected he was close to finding something big. He doubled his efforts, spending hours combing through Sarah's journal entries and cross-referencing them with the files on the USB drive. One detail stood out repeatedly: a storage unit listed under a fake name near the outskirts of town. That night, armed with flashlights and determination, Mark and Ryan drove to the address. The facility was deserted, its gates locked and rusted from disuse. Using bolt cutters, they forced their way inside, navigating rows of dusty containers until they found the one matching the number in Sarah's notes. Inside, they hit the jackpot. Boxes upon boxes of incriminating documents filled the space: contracts, bank statements, photos, and recordings implicating Langston in countless crimes. Among the items was a video file labeled Project Redemption. Curious, Mark plugged it into his laptop and hit play. What followed chilled him to the bone. The footage showed Langston meeting with several high-ranking officials, discussing plans to manipulate city policies for profit. In one clip, Langston explicitly ordered the intimidation and, in some cases, elimination of anyone who posed a threat to his operations. The final scene showed him casually mentioning Sarah by name, calling her a loose end that needed to be dealt with. Mark clenched his fists, anger boiling over. This was it, the smoking gun they had been searching for. But as he copied the files onto another USB drive, a distant sound caught his attention. Footsteps echoed through the empty facility, growing louder with each passing second. "Someone's here," Ryan hissed, gripping his flashlight like a weapon. Mark nodded, adrenaline coursing through him. "Grab the drives. We need to move now." They slipped out of the storage unit just as two men rounded the corner, their faces obscured by masks. Spotting Mark and Ryan, they shouted and gave chase. Heart pounding, the duo sprinted toward their car, narrowly avoiding capture. Bullets whizzed past them as they dove into the vehicle, tires screeching as they sped away. Back at Mark's house, they reviewed the new evidence, piecing together a plan to present it to federal investigators. By implicating multiple layers of corruption, including police officers, politicians, and businessmen, they ensured Langston wouldn't have anywhere to hide. But even as they prepared their case, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. His paranoia wasn't unfounded. Late that night, a black SUV parked across the street, its engine idling ominously. The next morning, Mark received a call from the hospital. Sarah was awake and asking for him. Relief washed over him as he rushed to her side, clutching the USB drive tightly. When he entered her room, she smiled weakly, her eyes lighting up at the sight of him. "Hey," she murmured, reaching for his hand. "You look exhausted." "I'll sleep when this is over," Mark replied, forcing a smile. He hesitated, then added, "Sarah, I need to ask you something. Do you remember anything about Project Redemption?" Her expression darkened. "It's fuzzy, but I think it has something to do with Langston. He mentioned it once during a meeting." "Why?" Mark explained everything they had uncovered, showing her the documents and videos. As she absorbed the information, tears welled up in her eyes. "I didn't mean to put us in danger," she whispered. "I just wanted to help people." "You did," Mark assured her, squeezing her hand. "And now we're going to make sure Langston pays for what he's done." With renewed resolve, Mark handed over the evidence to federal agents, ensuring it reached the right hands. Within days, warrants were issued, arrests made, and headlines screamed of corruption scandals rocking the city. Langston was finally brought to justice, his empire crumbling beneath the weight of irrefutable proof. But as Mark stood outside the courthouse watching reporters swarm around the scene, he realized the fight wasn't truly over. Powerful forces still lurked in the shadows, waiting for their moment to strike again. For now, though, he allowed himself a rare moment of peace, holding Sarah close and vowing to rebuild their lives together. No matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them side by side. The aftermath of Victor Langston's arrest sent shockwaves through the city. Newspapers splashed headlines across their front pages, detailing the fall of one of the most powerful men in town. Politicians scrambled to distance themselves from his tainted legacy, while citizens whispered about the web of corruption that had been exposed. For Mark Thompson, the victory felt bittersweet. Yes, justice had been served. Langston was behind bars, his accomplices arrested, and the evidence they had gathered ensured that no loopholes could save them this time. But at what cost? His life, and Sarah's, had been irrevocably changed. In the weeks that followed, Mark tried to focus on rebuilding what had been broken. The house where they had once felt safe now carried the lingering weight of fear. Every creak of the floorboards reminded him of the night he found Sarah lying unconscious, her whispered warning echoing in his mind. Though the surveillance device had been removed, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that unseen eyes still watched them. He decided it was time for a fresh start. One evening, as Sarah sat curled up on the couch with a blanket draped over her shoulders, Mark broached the subject. "What do you think about moving?" he asked gently. She looked up, surprised. "Moving? Where?" "Somewhere quieter," Mark replied. "A place where we can start over. No memories of all this madness." Sarah hesitated, then nodded, slowly. "Maybe you're right. Maybe we need a new beginning." It wasn't an easy decision, but both of them knew staying in the same neighborhood would only remind them of everything they'd endured. They sold the house quickly, packing away belongings and leaving behind not just furniture but also the ghosts of their past. Their new home was a small cottage nestled in the countryside, far from prying eyes and bustling streets. It was peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos they had left behind. As days turned into weeks, life began to settle into a fragile rhythm. Sarah returned to work, volunteering at a local community center instead of returning to Hope Haven. Her passion for helping others hadn't dimmed, but she approached it cautiously now, mindful of the dangers that lurked beneath seemingly innocent causes. Mark continued his role as a police officer, though he requested a transfer to a quieter precinct. He didn't want to risk encountering anyone connected to Langston's old network, or worse, becoming embroiled in another conspiracy. Despite the quiet routine, scars remained. Sarah occasionally woke up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, haunted by fragmented memories of the ordeal. Mark often found himself pacing the living room late at night, unable to sleep as his mind replayed every moment. The overturned furniture, the crumpled letters, the blinking red light of the surveillance device. But together, they leaned on each other, finding strength in their shared resilience. One afternoon, as they sat outside enjoying the crisp autumn air, Sarah broke the silence. "Do you ever wonder if we'll ever feel completely safe again?" Mark glanced at her, his expression softening. "I don't know if completely safe exists. Not really. Life is unpredictable. But I do know this. We survived something that could have destroyed us, and we did it together. That counts for something." Sarah smiled faintly, leaning her head against his shoulder. "You're right. We made it through the worst. Everything else feels manageable." Their resolve was tested sooner than either of them expected. A few months after moving, Mark received a letter addressed to him personally. There was no return address and the handwriting was unfamiliar. Tearing open the envelope, he unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. Written in bold, blocky letters were 3 words. "The game isn't over." His stomach churned as he stared at the message. Was this a prank? Or was someone trying to send a warning? Mark immediately called Ryan, who promised to investigate further. For days, they monitored the area around their new home, searching for any signs of surveillance or suspicious activity. Nothing turned up, but the unease lingered. Instead of letting fear consume him, Mark chose to take control. He installed additional security cameras around the property, upgraded their locks, and even took self-defense classes with Sarah. If someone wanted to play games, they were ready to fight back. Over time, the threat seemed to fade into the background, becoming little more than a distant memory. Mark and Sarah focused on healing, cherishing moments of normalcy. They planted a garden in the backyard, cooked meals together, and spent weekends exploring nearby hiking trails. Slowly but surely, laughter returned to their lives, replacing the tension that had gripped them for so long. But Mark never forgot the lessons he had learned. Corruption thrived in silence and secrecy. It preyed on those too afraid to speak up. Determined to prevent others from suffering the same fate, he began working with advocacy groups dedicated to exposing systemic injustices. Using his experience as both a victim and an investigator, he helped create protocols to protect whistleblowers and hold institutions accountable. Sarah joined him in this mission, channeling her trauma into activism. Together they spoke at conferences, wrote articles, and mentored individuals brave enough to challenge the status quo. Their story became a beacon of hope for others fighting similar battles, an example of how courage and perseverance could triumph over fear. Years later, sitting on the porch of their cottage as twilight painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, Mark reflected on how far they had come. The road had been long and fraught with challenges, but they had emerged stronger than ever. Sarah rested, her hand on his, her touch warm and reassuring. "We did it," she said softly. "We rebuilt our lives." Mark nodded, gazing out at the horizon. "Yeah, we did. And no matter what happens next, we'll face it together." For the first time in years, he truly believed those words. Whatever storms lay ahead, they would weather them side by side. Two ordinary people who had faced extraordinary circumstances and refused to give up. In the end, that was their greatest victory, not just surviving but thriving despite the odds. And as the stars began to twinkle above, Mark allowed himself to smile, a genuine, unguarded smile. They had earned their peace, and nothing, not even the shadows of the past, could take that away.